Daniel chapter 3, if you have your Bibles. I'm just going to read one verse of Scripture there in verse 11. In the third chapter of Daniel, we're going through our study in the book of Daniel, and you know where we're at here in the third chapter. At the conclusion of chapter 2, Daniel reveals a secret that leads Nebuchadnezzar to acknowledge his God. That there's much more than just acknowledging him to understand that he lives within. And we see this because we see the image that is built, and his decree across the land was that they would fall down and worship, and that's what verse 11 concludes. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. I was thinking about when Landon said tonight about Daniel's prayer. If there's one thing that Daniel will teach you if you study the book of Daniel, that prayer availeth much. The righteous prayer, the prayer of a righteous man, James says, availeth much. There is power in prayer. And I think sometimes, as often as we can sometimes physically meet a need, there's a lot of things that we can do, and sometimes we can give, and we can give money, and it takes care of the need. Sometimes it requires more effort and more time, and we give that, and it meets the need. But there are honestly times in life where the only thing you can do as a Christian is pray. And one thing that Daniel teaches is the greatest weapon that any Christian has is prayer. And the power of that is second to none. We've seen already by the third chapter that Daniel has already taken a bold stand. We know what happened in chapter 2. The king comes on the throne, makes a decree. He's going to wipe everybody out because everybody around him was lying to him about what they could talk about, how they could maybe explain the dream that he had. We know once again through prayer. Remember, he says him and his friends, what did they do that night? They prayed, didn't they? And I'm telling you, listen, have you ever had to pray earnestly? Sometimes it's happened, if you've lived long enough, it's probably happened in everybody's life in here that there's a time in your life where you really prayed. I mean, you spent time in prayer. Daniel was in such a place in chapter 2 because at daybreak, if he did not give the answer, what was going to happen? They're going to lose their life. So here in chapter 3, we see that he's built this great image, and there's some things that you can observe from this. Number one, the making of this image still shows the rebellion of this king against the God of heaven. And by the way, when you study this, you can understand God gave him world dominion. God was honoring him because even at his worst, the king was on the right track. He was taking care of God's people. And so he gives him world dominion, but it wasn't enough. Those who seek power and those who are power hungry often can't get enough. When something is achieved, they continue right on. And that's the story here in the life of Nebuchadnezzar. It also shows his pride. The second thing, we see his pride here in the image because it's really self-gratification as to what he has put together. And thirdly, the principle here was to bring all nations, tribes, and tongues together to be under one world government. And the connection there in Daniel goes back into the Old Testament where the repetition of the Tower of Babel. And everybody's heard that story. We know that forming of that one world religion. And there's many at working towards this today as a one world religion. Denominations and different churches. And if you think about all the denominations we have in church life, you can almost take a throw at it. It's we got Methodists, we got Baptists, we got factions of Baptists, and there's all kinds of different things in Church of God, and just different things in different religions that teach just a little difference, some a lot of the same things. But when you talk about the one true and living God, we understand that this movement is leading to something, which is the conclusion. When we go to the book of Revelation, we are heading towards the Great Tribulation. And that's what this correlation is teaching to the man of sin or the false prophet. This course is after the true church has been removed. Every believer in Christ, whoever he is, whatever his denomination, if he is trusting Christ, when the church is raptured, he will be taken. And so when we see this, we understand this truth that there is going to be, the church will be taken out before that time comes. There's a lot of people that lodge different on that, and they don't believe that, but I can't help that they're wrong. So anyway. So when you look here in verses 3 and go down through verse 6, there's something that is interesting here that you need to catch. There's nothing new here in the freedom of worship. Nothing new at all at this dedication service. When the orchestra began to play, they were to fall down, worship the image. And you say, well, what's the big deal about that? It was prearranged. That there is no personal religious involvement in this worship. It is, you have to do this or we'll take your life. There's a forcing here. And you see all the different instruments, all the different kinds of music. I got tickled. God's calling. Just kidding. I like to do that. So when you think about this, when you look at, I like what one writer said. He said this was the Babylonian beboppers. Here you have all these instruments that are being played. The point here is that this was more than a dedication. People were forced to worship. And I'm telling you, isn't it nice to know that your relationship with Jesus Christ, first of all, is personal. And second of all, when God leads you in your heart of worship, and it is spontaneous, you have the freedom to worship, and that you worship Him in spirit and in truth. You understand that there is a relationship that you have with Jesus Christ. That it's not something that you just do or that you're forced to do, that you understand. More accurate, these people went through just an outward form. The music was designed to appeal to the flesh. And I think that's something that is, and I don't think we always hit a home run, but I will say this tonight, and I'm not saying it because he's here, but I thank God for Craig Millsaps. I truly do, and I'm not saying that because he's sitting here. I say that because it's been a blessing to be in a church where that music is a priority, but it's just about Jesus. It's nothing else. And it's, if we're singing from the Rep Back hymnal to those that are involved in our praise team, it's always been about Jesus. It's always been about what truly moves the people that are up here that sing the songs, and it's something that they put together every Sunday. I think sometimes, probably maybe as a church, and I want to encourage this group tonight to begin to pray about that, because you've probably not really thought about it in this light. But I want to tell you that every Sunday, without fail, they come up here, and Craig involved with that, from the choir song to everything that is picked out. It's picked out based on what they're feeling at that moment. I truly am saying that it's spirit-led. Listen, if I didn't tell you that sometimes Craig just flips this thing open and goes right there, I'd be lying. But I'm telling you, when you think about this, to be spirit-led in something and to know at the last minute, this is the choir song I want to sing. And I don't know about you, but there's been times that I haven't told him what I was preaching on. I haven't told the praise team what I'm preaching on. And the moment that they finish, God He married it together. He put the song with the message every single time, Sunday after Sunday. And you're saying, how does God do that? He does it through the Spirit. And He marries those things together, so it gives us the rich feel that we get, hopefully that as we share the graces of God, the forgiveness of God, all the things that we readily accept and thank God for as a body of believers, that if we've been forgiven, if God has grace has touched our life, we understand. And I think so often that we might take that for granted. And I want to encourage you tonight, Wednesday night crowd, don't take that for granted. Pray. Pray for our music. Pray for the message. Pray for those things that when we come into this thing that because I believe spiritual music is a wonderful aid in worship. I'm telling you, I have seen it when it wasn't a part of church, and it's difficult. But when spiritual music is sung, I'm telling you, and listen, I ain't going to go too far down the road, but I'm just going to tell you, we have a lot of churches today that, honest to you, I don't know if you can tell the difference between the world and spiritual music. It's one thing that had been on Craig's mind, and he's like me. He's a lot older than I am. I don't want to get anybody confused tonight. But I do remember cutting my teeth on the Ribback hymnal. That's what I grew up on in church. That's what I know. I don't know this contemporary thing. Listen, I love the contemporary. I don't have nothing against it. But I like the fact that he says when we're here, we're going to sing it all. We're going to sing it out of the hymnals. We're going to sing it from the choir books. We're going to sing contemporary, but it's going to always, always, always be about lifting up Jesus. And as long as we do that, guys, I'm telling you, we need your prayers. We need your prayers more than anything. And see that difference here. Paul had a great deal to say about this and the importance of music for a believer in worship. He says in Ephesians 5:19, listen carefully, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to who? To the Lord. It helps us remember who we're singing about. In Colossians 3:16, he said, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Listen to this. Singing with grace in your heart to the Lord. How many in here tonight really understands grace? I think when we talk about grace, and I think sometimes we get on the hinges of grace, on the outskirts of grace, but I don't really know if we understand grace. And I'm including myself in this when I think about that, because we talked about this a great deal in Sunday school this past Sunday about truly what the grace of God has done and what the grace of God can do. You know, when you think about what he's talking about, singing with grace in your heart to the Lord for all that he has done. Music, here in the Old Testament got off, I think, to a bad start. But it really, when you think about it, whenever music or rituals appeal to the flesh, it degrades rather than elevates. And I think that's a good way to put it. It never aids in true worship. In fact, if it's ritualistic and it's just music, it can cancel worship out. It can leave things truly that it just feels dead. And I don't know if you've ever been in a service that felt dead. If you've ever been in a place like that, you know what I'm talking about. It seems lifeless, and we have a lot of churches, and I'm not making fun, but I have been in places where what they do is ritualistic. Perhaps they sing the same song, or we sing the same thing, and we do it every Sunday. It's just become a part of what we do. And I think churches need to get away from that. I think, if you're not careful, you don't listen to the words. It's just something that you're just going through the motion. And I think that's what he's talking about here. Be careful about your spiritual worship and what really can begin to change those things in your life. So look in verse 12 with me. There are many or certain Jews whom thou hast overset the affairs of the providence of Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now remember, who was not at the celebration? Okay, this is where this is coming in right here in this verse. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Here comes the problem. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if you be ready at that what time you hear the sound of the cornet, now this has been said twice, by the way, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all the kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made well. But if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy God, nor worship the golden image that thou hast set up. That's pretty plain English, isn't it? Let me give you the gold mine translation. I ain't going to do it. It's not happening. There's a boldness here in serving the Lord. And you'll notice this. As he gives him the rundown of what everybody else was told, he did so because these three were absent. The Bible doesn't tell us where they were at or if they even knew perhaps that they were actually meeting. But through this outward sign of the act of worship, I think they were convinced in their hearts that they were not going to bow. They were not going to compromise. And I think one of the things that is facing the church today that probably most of you would agree is I think the church has compromised with the world too much. And I think where we have compromised with the world is the fact of even in our music and what we end up trying to do, and some may disagree with me, but I think we spend more time trying to be more worldly than what God ever designed us to be. Because we think if we are a little worldly, we can do what? We can win more people. I'm telling you, but when you think about the picture of salt and light, God has always told the church to be light. We have to be different. We are designed to be different. We are different from the world for a purpose. Some churches say that if you're growing, that you're all worldly. I don't believe that either. This is not a sign that if you're not growing and you're a dead church that God's put his stamp on you. I believe what it's saying that if we are a spiritual body, if the Spirit lives within us, we seek to please God, live our lives according to him, every day touched by his grace. I think it can make an impactful difference in our life that when we are here, when we worship in spirit and in truth, through message and through song, we will give people something different. In other words, they will see Jesus. See, I don't know, the things that you don't get to know is Sunday we had somebody join our church, and right after service I got to lead somebody to faith in Jesus. And sometimes you don't get to see those things and you don't know that, but I'm telling you, it's when the church will be what God designed the church to be, it will draw people. That's what Jesus said. He said, all you have to do is what? Lift me up. Honor me. I'll do the work. I'll draw all men to myself. I just want you to do one thing as a church. Lift me up. Exalt me. Not you. Exalt me. And see, I think that's where a lot of the times, even in church life, we can truly make mistakes when we are not where we need to be in doing that one thing that he has called us to do. The king here was apparently at a place as he speaks to these young men. They brought them before him, and it tells me there's some people always against them. You ever just think sometimes that I got tickled? I don't know. I was down there. I went down there to the place and went down to the FEMA shop. I can just tell you, boy, that was a blessing. Listen to this. They told us they would try to help us. Are y'all ready? They're going to give us, everybody sit down now, don't jump up, $175 to fix the bridge. That's the state of it's the state of this nation. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I mean, I was really thought we was going to get some help. That lady went out of her way, man. I spent an hour with her. She was so happy to help me. And, wow, that was a mind-blower. And you think about all these things, and you think about what's the point of all that? I'm saying the church still has to be different. We are to be calling people out of darkness into the light. And, you know, we can act crazy and we can get mad about those things, and it does infuriate you because, you know, they'll spend it everywhere but where it needs to be than at home. But when you think about all these things, these men had a group of people that were against them. And don't miss this. This world is not for the Church of Jesus Christ. I don't know why that surprises us. They have never been. And Jesus Christ even said that he said, if they hate me, they'll hate you. I don't know why it's confusing to us sometimes. The more we lift him up, the more the world's going to come against us. The more Satan's going to come against us. And listen, this world is not healing and it's not getting better. I don't care what the next 4 years hold. It may look good for a lot of people, but listen, I'm excited about what happened, but I'm telling you, I'm not depending on Washington. It's not going to fix this. This stuff that Revelation's talking about is coming true in God's timetable, and we ain't going to stop it. But he says if we live for him, we exalt him, and we lift him up. This crowd came and said, they were tattletales. They're like little children. They said, hey, I just didn't know if you knew, King, but your three special boys, they wasn't at the celebration. You know why? They wanted them dead. You know, want to know why? Because in chapter 2, the Bible says that Daniel rose to a place of power. Listen, he was taken captive at 17 and through the work of God because he stood for God in times that I'm telling you, his knees was shaking. But that boy had a backbone. I'm not backing up. I'm not sitting down. I'm staying with my God, and I don't care if you like it or if you don't like it. And God put him over everybody. You think that was an accident? I would have thought this nut would have figured this out by now. But here he is in chapter 3, and what happened? Listen, rage got a hold of him. Anger got a hold of him. And here he is. He's coming against these men. There's a lot of things that he probably suffered from. But Nebuchadnezzar, as he spoke, is this true? He asked them, if the charge was true, had they refused to worship his God and the image that he set up? Now look what the king's doing. He gives them another opportunity to change their mind and fall down before the image. I know what he's doing here. I believe he truly probably had in his heart love for Daniel. And so in this, through their submission,
There would have been a worse reproach on the outset. But as he recites the penalty for the refusal and shows the fallacy of it, the king again heard of their God before and that he was able to deliver them. See, if you remember, he went back in chapter 2 at the end when he gave him the vision. Remember, nobody else could do it. Daniel brought the vision to the king. What did he say? You remember? Go back to chapter 2, the very end. Verse 47. The king answered Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is the God of gods. He's a Lord of kings. He's a revealer of secrets, seeing that you could reveal the secret. Now listen, don't miss this. He ain't saved yet. But I think he's on his way. You're going to see this here in chapter 3, that what is truly taking place here. Look at the answer there in verse 16. They address the king, but they do not say, O king, live forever. He says, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. It means I've already weighed the consequences. I know what you're going to do when I refuse to obey. I've counted the cost. I'm not being careful in giving this answer. In other words, I ain't concerned about my well-being. You can do whatever you want to me, but I'm staying with God. Come on, guys. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing has occurred to God? He knows you better than you know you. And I'll say this, there's probably not been many in this room that have suffered for the cause of Christ. I didn't say that you hadn't give, that you haven't put out, that you haven't went, that you haven't gave money. I feel like this room right here, I'm talking to my people. There's people in here that I know personally that you're serious about what you give to the Lord. I said, I don't think there's many in here who have suffered for the cause of Christ. Guys, listen, if these men in the Bible, if we could tell them what we thought commitment was, they would laugh us to hell. That's a big statement. I heard that made before, and I've never forgotten it. If they could hear what we think commitment is today, they would laugh us to hell. There's a challenge before these men, and as they give this answer, they give this answer to the king. Now, the wise men in Babylon would have advised these three Hebrew boys to fall down and worship, but they remembered what their God said. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And if you want to know what I believe is the greatest sin today, it is the sin of idolatry. Because there's a lot of things we put before God in our lives, even as individuals. That can be true for your pastor. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot tonight. I'm talking about the sin of idolatry. Thou shalt not make any graven images or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, and I am a jealous God. Exodus chapter 20. Visiting the iniquities of the father upon the children of the third and fourth generation that hate me, and showing mercy unto the thousands of them that love me, God said to his children, keep my commandments. These Hebrew children were true to God, and it took a great deal of courage to take this position. They couldn't back up, and they were not going to. If it be so, here's the last two verses, and I got to close. It's 5 till. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They don't leave any room for error. It's in this passage here, they make it very clear. If it is God's will, he will deliver us out of your hand. But regardless, I'm not going to worship anyone but God. And I tell you, when we think about this, we think about what he's talking about here. This man had the power to take their life. But I have a belief in my heart, already by chapter 3, that Daniel had seen God prove himself so many times, he wasn't afraid. How many times has God proven himself in your life? Has he ever? I know in mine he has. And at the times when I probably deserved the worst, he showered me with grace, and I didn't deserve it. But I think a lot about this. I think about this the older I get. I do feel like that my responses are getting bolder in him. I'm not saying I'm a Daniel, but I do believe that I guess maybe we're getting better with age. Is that a good way to say it? Does anybody else feel that way? That I've come this far and I'm not leaving him now. I'm going to stay in the boat, ain't you? I've come too far to turn back now. There's just, I believe what this book says. And I'll tell you this, I know more Bible than I'm living. But I think about this story and its desire. These men flatly refused. And I believe it's high time that God's people started standing up to this world. Because, folks, we're not helping people by compromising. And listen, this world has tried to silence the church. It's been going on for decades, and they've done a pretty good job. I find it ironic if you could ever hear these men talk about Baptist men and the work that they do and the things that go on. It's funny to me. Long after the FEMA is gone, and long after the National Guard is gone, Kevin Rogers shared this 2 weeks ago in our Sunday school class. Do you know who will be there for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, helping those people rebuild? That's the difference that Jesus makes. And that's the difference we can make with Jesus if we're willing to give up ourselves and say, use me. Take what you've given me, take what you've blessed me with, and use me for your glory, for no other reason. That's the prayer I pray every Sunday. I don't deserve to preach. I don't deserve to be here, but I'm telling you, it is my desire that God use me for his glory and no other reason. Because it's all about him. It ain't about me. And I tell you, when we realize that, and we realize we're not getting out of the boat, we're staying with him, it might help us take a stand, because I believe we will see the church in its day when we're going to have to take a stand. And it probably will not be comfortable. And I'll be honest with you, I think when it gets really uncomfortable, I wonder who will be around. Because that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when you find out who truly means what they say when they say, I've come too far to turn around. I'm staying with God. Because I'm telling you, how many of you believe he's worth it? I know that. Let's stand all over this place tonight. Craig, would you dismiss us, please?